The chamber of the 12 alpha seats had never been quiet like that, not even on morning days, because wolves always made sound when they smelled a shift in rank coming. Breath moved, nails tapped oak, chairs creaked under men who had commanded armies and expected the world to agree with them. Tonight they sat in a half-circle under frost-glass windows, while Griffin Stormborn stood alone on the black stone floor, unranked Omega, 22 years old, accused, defended, and now called forward for a vote that could still break her in public a second time. She kept her chin level because lowering it had once cost her too much. Her palms were wet anyway. Sabine stood at the witness rail with both hands wrapped around carved wood, face pale and furious, still wearing mourning silver for a husband dead 5 years as if widowhood itself were a title. Rook Halden stood 3 steps behind her in ceremonial black, jaw rigid, the same jaw he had clenched at 19 when he looked at Griffin before the pack, and said he rejected the bond pairing proposed by their elders. He did not look at her now. King Theron Duskwalker sat higher than all 12, not counted among them for the ratification vote, spine straight, face unreadable to everyone except the woman who had spent months trying to decide if unreadable meant indifferent or careful. His gaze rested on Griffin for one beat too long, then shifted to the council clerk. Read the threshold. 9 votes required out of 12 for ratification of royal mate claim, the clerk said. Griffin tasted iron where she had bitten her cheek. 9 yes votes stood between her and a life where no one could sell her labor, trade her body, or drag her into a corrective bond because she had refused to bow. 9 yes votes stood between her and another public rejection stamped into law. The first carved token struck the counting bowl. Yes. The second token rolled in, hit bronze, stopped. No. Her pulse climbed her throat. She did not look up at Theron because looking up had started to feel like leaning. A third token? Yes. Fourth? Yes. Fifth? No. By the time the 8th token fell, she had 6 yes and 2 no. She heard the 9th before she saw it, a hard click, and the clerk's voice cut through the chamber. 9 reached. Everything in her body went still so fast it felt like impact. The final 3 votes still came. 1 no, 2 yes, bringing the total to 11 and 1, yet the deciding edge had already passed. The room erupted with layered scent, surprise, anger, surrender. Old order learning it had bent. Theron rose. For the record, claim ratified by council law, he said. Proceed to covenant review. Griffin almost laughed, not from joy, from disbelief at his timing. He moved straight into law while her knees threatened to fold. He had done this in every hearing, protected procedure like armor, and she had hated him for weeks, because the armor made tenderness impossible to trust. The clerk opened the second ledger. Motion before council. Repeal of compulsory Omega bowing statute in Winter Tribunal Protocol. The floor blurred for a beat. That sentence had been impossible her whole life. She forced her focus back and caught Ira Vale in the upper gallery. Archive keeper's gray robes rumpled from an all-night document review, both hands pressed over her mouth to hide a shaking smile. To understand why Griffin had needed her jaw locked and her shoulders level under 12 sets of alpha eyes, it had to go back to the first time she refused to bow. 3 winters earlier, when she was 19 and still believed humiliation had an end point. The pack kept its bowing right in the central yard every first snow. Omegas lined on one side, alphas and betas on the other, elders in white fur at the stairs, everyone pretending it was tradition and not a sorting machine. Griffin arrived in borrowed boots 1 size too large because Sabine had sold her winter allowance for household debts and called it discipline. She stood with the other young Omegas waiting to be assigned placements, labor routes, pairings if politically useful. Her pulse had been loud enough to make speech hard. Rook Halden was 20 then, heir to a command seat in the Western Barracks, broad-shouldered, careful with his smile when audiences mattered. Griffin had grown up in his shadow line, passed notes with him at harvest, learned strategy maps from him when nobody watched. She believed, in that dangerous 19-year-old way, that history between two people could survive public pressure. When her name was called with his for provisional pairing review, she stepped forward. Rook did not. He spoke from the line where he stood. I reject. No argument, no explanation, no private warning, one word in front of their entire pack. Laughter did not break out, which somehow hurt more. Silence carried all the agreement she needed to hear. An elder cleared his throat and moved to the next name. Griffin remained in place for 3 breaths, then 4, because her legs had forgotten command. Sabine crossed the yard, fingers digging into Griffin's forearm hard enough to bruise. Kneel, Sabine hissed, smile fixed for onlookers. Take your lesson now, and maybe your life stays manageable. Griffin looked at the stone steps, at packed snow stamped with boots, at her own knees through torn wool, and felt something lock inside her that would not unlock after. No. Sabine squeezed harder. No, Griffin said again, louder. That one syllable changed her legal position by sunset. She was marked unranked Omega, restricted from nesting rights, excluded from placement protections that came with formal bowing compliance. It was designed as correction. In practice, it became permission. Merchants underpaid her courier work. Patrol captains rerouted her through dangerous passes because unranked complaints disappeared in clerical stacks. Sabine took guardianship over all contracts in Griffin's name and signed them with a neat hand, always calling it necessary. Griffin learned 2 things that winter. People in hierarchy respected paperwork more than truth spoken without seal. The second lesson was harder. Public rejection did not fade with time on its own. It settled into bone until someone challenged it in the same public light where it had been inflicted. By 20, she ran mountain routes no one else wanted, carrying legal packets between remote den holds, archive bundles, weather alerts, tax notices, and once a death sentence, she delivered with shaking hands to a widow who thanked her for being honest before she opened it. Griffin told the truth when lying would have bought safety. She did not do it to look brave. She did it because wrong information got people killed in winter. Each year in 2026, 2027, and early 2028, she was summoned to winter tribunal as required under her stigma code. Each year, every Omega bowed when names were read. Each year, she stood upright. The first time, murmurs. The second time, disciplinary fines. The third time, extra guards around her transfer route and a line in the official log that read, non-compliant subject monitored. The king attended all 3 tribunals from the high gallery, silent behind carved screens. Griffin felt his gaze in 2026 and called it curiosity. She felt it again in 2027 and called it irritation. By 2028, she called it strategic interest, the way rulers studied unstable variables before deciding whether to remove them. She had never been wrong about danger before, which made being wrong about him so hard to see while she was living it. Early in 2028, the route that changed everything arrived wrapped in ordinary twine. Courier docket, archive annex, urgent, sealed for Spymaster review only. It came from Era Vale, who worked the Omega Legal Registry in a room under the old library where mold ate bindings and nobody powerful visited unless they needed a file weaponized. Era met Griffin in the alley behind the registry, hood up against sleet, eyes ringed from missed sleep. If this packet vanishes, they bury 6 girls before spring, Era said. Do not trust mid-level intake. Hand this to Ilian Voss directly. Griffin took the packet. Wax seal carried no sigil, only a pressed thumbprint in black ink. What is it? Labor contracts, Era said. Forced assignments signed under guardianship authority, sold to mineral camps past legal hour limits. One guardian name repeats. She did not need to say, Sabine. Griffin smelled the answer before she heard it. Proof quality? Ledger copies, payment schedules, 2 witnesses prepared to testify if Crown protection is real. Griffin nodded once, tucked the packet under her inner vest, and changed routes twice before reaching palace intake. Ilyan Voss met her in a stone corridor that smelled of old smoke and wet leather, spymaster plain in dark coat, face cut from angles and restraint. "You asked for me by name," he said. She held the packet out. "Read before someone edits the world." Ilyan broke seal with a small blade and scanned the first pages without moving any other muscle. One breath passed, then another. His eyes sharpened. "Who has seen this?" "Era. Me. Whoever drafted the originals." "Who knows you carried it?" "Unknown." He closed the folder. "You will remain on palace grounds until preliminary review." She laughed once, short and bitter. Protective custody sounds a lot like containment. "It can be both," Ilyan said. "Today it is protection if these ledgers are authentic." He signaled 2 guards. Griffin followed because refusing in that corridor would have ended with restraints and no leverage. The first hearing convened 48 hours later, closed chamber, 6 legal clerks, 2 council observers, Sabine called as contracting guardian, Griffin seated at witness end with no rank marker on her chair. Theron entered last, crown absent, king's signet on right hand only, which was how he appeared when he wanted law to look separate from theater. Griffin hated how his presence altered room temperature in her body. Some mix of dread and attention that made breath costly. He did not acknowledge her first. He reviewed docket order, assigned speaking times, restricted interruptions. Procedure. Always procedure. When Sabine's advocate tried to disqualify Griffin as unranked, Theron cut him off. "Crown Code grants courier standing in evidence chain," he said. Objection denied. It saved her testimony and still landed like ice. He had protected structure, not her, she told herself. He could not afford to seem partial with council eyes present. He asked questions in short declarative lines, never softened his tone, never looked at her long enough to invite interpretation. She left the chamber raw with gratitude she did not want, and anger she understood better. By week's end, rumors spread across the city that the king was using an unranked Omega to strike rival houses through anti-trafficking code. Griffin heard the whispers in market lanes and palace stairwells, each version reducing her from witness to tool. The whisper reached her the same night she saw Theron alone for the first time outside a courtroom. He stood near the training yard rail in shirt sleeves, forearms bandaged from blade drills, speaking with Ilyan. Griffin stopped in shadow when she heard her own name. "Transfer route to South Annex tomorrow is exposed," Ilyan said. "Double the escort." "Already done." "Change timing twice. Keep her off public stairs." Ilyan glanced toward her hidden position, perhaps sensing movement. Theron did not turn. "If she asks," he said, "tell her protocol adjustment." Not safety. Protocol. He built distance even in private instructions. Griffin slipped away before they could spot her. Her chest tightened with a confusion she refused to name. Men did not order route changes for people they considered expendable. Kings did not hide concern unless concern itself was dangerous. The transfer attack came 2 days later before dawn on the covered bridge between Tribunal Wing and Archive Court, the one Ilyan had flagged. Griffin walked center line between 4 royal guards, wrists unbound, docket satchel chained to her belt. Snow blew sideways through the slatted walls. Halfway across, a maintenance cart blocked their path, wheels angled wrong for storage. She smelled oil before she saw steel. Crossbow bolts tore through plank gaps from both sides. First guard dropped with a bolt in his neck. Second spun and fired back through slats. Griffin hit the floor by instinct, cheek against freezing boards, ears full of splinter crack and shouted commands. Someone kicked the cart and it rolled, releasing weighted nets soaked in binding resin. One net caught her shoulder and pinned her arm to the boards. She clawed for the belt knife at her back, got fingers on hilt, lost it when a third bolt struck inches from her wrist. Then the bridge doors blew inward. Theron entered with 6 blackguard wolves at his back. No cloak, no crown, only war leathers and a face stripped down to intent. He crossed to her through active fire, took a bolt through his left pauldron without slowing, ripped the resin net with bare hands, and hauled her upright behind his body while his guard team secured both exits. "Down," he said, pressing her toward a support pillar. "I can move," she snapped, adrenaline making her loud. "You move when I say." She would remember the next 30 seconds for the rest of her life, not because of the violence, because of his reaction to it. King's delegated response. Kings protected institutions first and witnesses second. Theron fought as if one unranked Omega mattered more than keeping his own blood off bridgeboards. When the final attacker was pinned alive and dragged into snow, Theron remained crouched in front of Griffin, hands on her shoulders checking for punctures with quick clinical pressure that shook once at her collarbone before he controlled it. "You hit?" "No." His eyes searched hers as if no spoken answer could be trusted. "Look at me," he said. "I am looking at you. Stay awake." "I was never unconscious." A breath that might have been relief left him sharp and unsteady. He stood too fast, barked orders, sealed the bridge, detained 3 maintenance workers linked to schedule access. By noon, rumors had shifted from political theater to assassination attempt. The council convened emergency security review. Griffin sat through it with dried blood on her sleeve and a growing certainty that she had misread him in at least one direction, though she still did not know whether to trust what she had seen under stress. That evening, Ilion delivered a blunt assessment. "Attempt had inside timing data," he said. "Likely someone with legal docket access." Griffin thought of Sabine's household clerk, of Rook's command office, of ledger copies passing through too many hands. Her stomach turned. "Do you think they wanted to kill me or discredit the case?" Either result served the same network. The next week gave them a cleaner attack. No bolts, no blood, only paper with forged signatures. Sabine submitted courier logs to the tribunal proving, on their face, that Griffin had stolen archive ledgers 6 months before Era discovered them. Entries showed Griffin's route marks, her hand signs, her timing codes. Rook validated chain of custody as command witness. The chamber shifted in seconds. Witness became suspect. Protection turned conditional. Griffin felt the old 19-year-old shame rise hot at the back of her neck. Public doubt closing over her like water. Theron read the forged logs without expression. "Defendant requests immediate detainment of witness pending theft inquiry," Sabine's advocate said. Griffin stood before anyone could answer. "Those logs are false." Sabine looked almost tender when she replied. "Child, your memory has always bent when frightened." The phrase hit harder than accusation. Sabine had used it since Griffin was 12. Every time Griffin objected to a contract or questioned missing wages, train diminishment wrapped his care. Theron turned one page, then another. "Spymaster," he said. "Ink analysis on entries dated 7th Frost, 2027. Ilion took the log, scanned, and raised one brow. "Carbon blend includes coastal pine ash additive introduced this spring by Royal Suppliers," he said. "Entries cannot predate 2028. Rook's face drained color. The room cracked open. Griffin should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt tired in a way that reached bone, because proving one lie only exposed the scale of effort invested in erasing her. Theron dismissed session for forensic review and ordered Sabine and Rook held to chamber radius under guard. As Griffin moved to leave, Theron spoke without looking up. "Stay." She froze. When the chamber emptied, he set the forged log aside and finally faced her. "You were right to challenge chain records," he said. She waited for the rest, formal thanks or strategic instruction. Nothing came. His jaw tightened, loosened. Your escort double's effective now. There it is, she said, laugh thin with fatigue. Containment again. Security. Under your control. Under my protection. She had no answer ready for that word in his mouth. Protection. Spoken like obligation, not leverage. Fear answered first. People who protect me tend to invoice later. His eyes changed at that. A flicker she almost missed. Pain or anger turned inward. I do not invoice safety, he said. He stepped back as if he had said too much, called in guards, ended the conversation on procedural terms. The second crack appeared and vanished before she could hold it. Outside the chamber she found Ira waiting with 3 archive bundles and a brittle attempt at humor. If you get framed again, pick a document no one can pronounce, Ira said. At least the transcripts would be entertaining. Griffin laughed for real this time. One breath of relief in a corridor full of surveillance. Pressure mounted from directions Griffin could not track. 2 border alphas threatened to suspend winter grain convoys unless the palace closed the trafficking inquiry. One of them offered a compromise through council channels that sounded like old law in polished language. Release all charges against signatory houses, classify Griffin as destabilizing witness, place her into corrective mate bond with a neutral clan to remove her from court. Corrective bond. Legal cage with ceremonial flowers. Ilian read the proposal aloud in strategy chamber while Theron stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back. Acceptance secures Eastern Military Alliance before thaw campaign, Ilian said. Refusal risks troop shortfall by late spring. Griffin watched Theron's shoulders, waiting for pragmatic cruelty because rulers always chose kingdom math over 1 omega. Theron turned. Draft refusal, he said. Your Majesty, one council advisor started. If we lose the Halvern line, we lose 1,200 spears. Draft refusal, Theron repeated. No corrective bond, no trade. The room went still. Griffin did not understand what she was feeling because gratitude and terror arrived together. He had just sacrificed a military alliance tied to 1,200 spears for her legal agency, and she did not know how to stand inside that knowledge without expecting a hidden clause. Later that night, she found him alone in the old observatory above the archive wing, a circular room open to winter sky, where kings once charted migration routes before radio towers existed. She came to return a sealed draft he had requested from Era. She stayed because his voice stopped her at the doorway. You should be asleep. So should you. He leaned on the stone rail, looking down at torch lines in the lower court. Sleep is inefficient this month. A brittle joke from him felt more intimate than touch. She crossed halfway into the room. You lost Halvern support because of me. I lost Halvern support because they demanded criminal procedure for sale, he said. That was never negotiation. You could have said no and still left me exposed somewhere else. I could have. He said it flatly, no comfort added, which made the next sentence land harder. I did not. She took a breath that hurt. Why? He looked at her then, direct, unarmored for a single beat. Because you keep standing when kneeling would save you, he said. I needed to know if that was pride. It was not. 3 years of being watched settled into shape in her head. Not staged humiliation. Pattern recognition. She wanted to ask why he had waited so long. She wanted to ask what changed this month. Footsteps sounded on stairs before she chose either question. He turned away first and the moment closed. The apparent impossibility arrived with speed and bloodline names. Sabine's network ran deeper than illegal labor contracts. Under forensic pressure, one witness disappeared, another recanted, and a coded ledger surfaced linking Stormborn kin branches to brokers in 3 provinces. If Griffin testified fully, she would implicate cousins who had sheltered her after the Boeing riot and an older brother by marriage who once paid her medical fees. Crown Code allowed witness immunity for direct disclosure, but bloodline treason penalties still carried exile if collusion touched immediate household lines. Sabine met Griffin in a secured visitation room and tried tenderness again. "Withdraw now," she said. "Say you misread the records. You come home. This ends. There is no home in your contracts." Sabine's expression hardened. "Truth has a body count, child. Can you carry it?" The question followed Griffin all night. She sat in archive basement with Era and spread names across a long table, each line a person, each person a memory. Good moments existed with some of them. Shared bread, borrowed coats, fever care, none of that erased signatures on forced labor transfers. Moral clarity sounded clean in speeches and filthy in practice. Ira watched her for a long minute. "You are waiting for permission to protect people who hurt others," she said quietly. "I am waiting to know whether telling all of it makes me disloyal or late." Era touched the top page. "Disloyal to what?" Griffin looked down at the storm-born seal pressed in red wax and felt the old wound shift into something sharper, chosen pain instead of inherited one. "Tomorrow I testify publicly," she said. The hearing opened to full gallery at noon, first public session since the attack. Council benches packed. Market guilds in upper rows, military officers at side rail, 12 alpha seats occupied, each with household colors draped behind carved backs. Griffin walked to the witness circle in plain gray, no family pin, no guardian mark. Rook took stand first for defense review. Under Ilyan's questioning, his timeline fractured within 7 answers. He claimed he had received courier logs from archive intake on 12th Frost, 2027. Ilyan presented procurement records proving the intake clerk he named had been posted 2 provinces away that month. Rook shifted, corrected, contradicted himself again when confronted with guard gate ledgers showing he was on night patrol during the delivery he described. By the time he stepped down, the court did not need a ruling to know his testimony had collapsed. Sabine followed. She denied coercion, denied sale, denied knowledge of forged logs. Griffin listened without blinking until called. When she took the circle, the clerk asked formal oath. Griffin gave it in full. Ilyan began with chain evidence, then paused. "Do you wish to add direct statement beyond requested scope?" This was the point where she could protect herself by limiting disclosure. She felt every eye in the room and the old instinct to go small, survive quietly, keep what little remained. She spoke anyway. Sabine Stormborn used guardianship law to sign forced Omega labor contracts, Griffin said. She did not act alone. Stormborn branch members in North Vale and River Bend facilitated transfers. I have names, payment routes, and witness contacts. Some names are kin who once fed me. Their signatures stand. A sound moved through the gallery like wind through dry reeds. She kept going, each sentence an incision. I received warning letters to withdraw. I received offers of marriage placement if I recanted. I was told speaking would exile me from bloodline protection. I speak anyway because law without witness is theater. On the dais, one of the 12 cursed under his breath. Another leaned forward with sudden interest. Theron did not move. Griffin finished with one final line she had written and rewritten in her head for days. I was rejected publicly at 19 and taught my value was conditional. My testimony is not a request to be valued. It is record. Silence followed, heavy and clean. In that silence, Theron's perspective broke through her own for a brief, dangerous moment, not because she could read his mind, because his face shifted in a way no one else in the room seemed able to see. He had spent 3 years measuring whether her refusal to bow came from wounded pride, strategy, or principle. In that witness circle, he saw the answer complete itself. She had chosen truth over blood shelter with full awareness of exile risk. Exactly the choice he had built his own rule around after betrayal took his brother and his first intended 10 years earlier. He had sworn then to trust only patterns, never claims. Griffin's pattern had held under maximal cost. The hearing recessed after sunset with detention orders for Sabine and 5 listed co-signatories. Rook's command authority was suspended pending perjury review. Griffin walked out into snow-lit court expecting relief and found only exhaustion, because courage did not cancel grief. It only clarified what had to be done. Theron met her on the lower steps where no audience could easily hear. You gave full bloodline disclosure. Yes. Do you understand probable consequence? Exile petition from surviving kinlines. Yes. He studied her a long second. I can block petition through emergency royal discretion for 30 days. Temporary shelter, she said. Not a life. No. He looked past her to the city lights, voice lower. Come to council tomorrow. For what? For completion. He left before she could parse the word. By morning, notices spread through palace halls that the king had called extraordinary session of the 12 alpha seats for 2 motions, royal mate claim ratification and covenant law reform on Omega bowing. Shock moved faster than paper. Some called it madness. Some called it tactical theater to stabilize witness confidence. Griffin called it impossible and tried not to shake as Era braided her hair with steady hands in a room that smelled of pine resin and hot metal from nearby brazier. If they reject, Griffin said, staring at her own reflection and barely recognizing it, I am publicly broken twice. Era tied the final chord. If they reject, they show everyone what this system is. If they ratify, they cannot pretend you were ever invisible. Griffin gave a thin smile. You should run speeches. I prefer ledgers, less shouting. Before session call, Ilian arrived with security updates and an envelope sealed in black wax. From the king, he said. She broke seal. Inside, one handwritten line in Theron's terse script. No one will make you kneel in my hall again. Her throat closed around a laugh that felt too close to tears. It was the first sentence he had given her that sounded like feeling without legal framing. Spymaster, she asked, folding the paper carefully. Why now? Ilian considered, then answered with his usual precision. He waited 3 years to confirm your refusal was moral consistency. Last month confirmed it under coercion. Yesterday confirmed it under blood cost. He trusts patterns he cannot bribe. She nodded once. The explanation did not lessen fear. It gave fear shape. The chamber vote unfolded as she had feared in the cold open, hard token by hard token. 9 needed, 11 achieved. Claim ratified. She barely absorbed it before the repeal motion opened, and this time, debate erupted. Seat 4 argued bowing kept tribunal order and symbolic respect. Seat 7 countered that forced gestures under legal threat invalidated consent and produced false compliance metrics. Seat 2, old rival to Theron's house, accused the king of letting mate preference dictate covenant policy. Theron answered without raising his voice. Policy already failed. We are correcting failure. Seat 2 sneered. For 1 Omega. Theron's gaze did not shift. For law. Griffin watched him choose restraint over dominance in a room that often rewarded the reverse. The vote came after 1 hour that felt like 6. Repeal passed 10-2. The clerk read statute amendment into record, effective immediately across all tribunal jurisdictions. Era cried openly in the gallery. Ilian, who never smiled in public, looked almost human for half a second. Then came the claiming right itself, stripped of theater by Theron's explicit request, witnessed, legal, irrevocable once both parties spoke. He stepped down from dais to stand level with Griffin on the black stone floor. Protocol offered him first declaration as claimant king. He did not touch her yet. Griffin Stormborn, he said, voice carrying to rafters. I claim by bond recognition and by deliberate choice. I claim with full counsel witness. I claim without condition. Her pulse thudded so loud she almost missed the clerk's prompt for response. She had spent years being chosen only when useful, dropped when inconvenient. This was different in scale and in risk, yet she still had to choose, not receive. That mattered. He had paid cost in alliance loss and public vulnerability. She had paid cost in bloodline fracture and public exposure. The final step belonged to her. Theron Duskwalker, she said, voice rough then steady. I accept bond recognition and I choose you with full knowledge of consequence. I do not bow. I stand with you. A murmur moved through the chamber. Not scandal this time. Something closer to release. Theron's hand lifted, paused where she could refuse, then rested against her cheek. Warm. Real. Stand with me, he echoed. The formal seal required blood pricks to paired signets, witnessed by clerk and 2 council seats. They signed. The room recorded. No one could undo it without tearing Crown law itself. Sabine's sentencing came at dusk in the same chamber. No delay. Illegal guardianship exploitation, coercive labor contracting, evidence tampering, conspiracy and witness endangerment. She was stripped of guardianship authority over all living wards and remanded to a border estate under permanent legal restriction, no contract rights, no household command. Her removal did more than punish one woman. It created precedent for immediate guardian review petitions filed by any Omega with documented coercion indicators. Rook's judgment followed. Perjury, forged evidence submission, abuse of command access. He lost his command seat and court standing, reassigned to non-command labor service outside capital jurisdiction. He left without looking at Griffin once. Weeks passed, and the story moved from chamber drama into institutional repair. Slower, less visible, just as critical. Ira Vale was appointed to lead the new Omega Legal Registry with independent audit authority and direct petition line to Crown Review. She moved her office out of the mold basement into 2 bright rooms near civil courts and immediately hired 3 clerks who had previously been dismissed as difficult. Griffin did not become decorative royalty. She took co-ruler oath in late spring and insisted on retaining courier field inspections twice a month until new contract safeguards stabilized. At first, advisors called it unbecoming. Theron signed the order anyway. The first time Griffin entered Winter Tribunal after repeal, she wore crown-linked silver at her throat and plain boots she preferred for grip on wet stone. Omegas stood in side rows, alphas on raised benches, old arrangement intact except for one absent command. No bowing call came. A young Omega near the back, maybe 18, looked uncertain and half-bent from habit before catching herself. Griffin held her gaze and gave a small nod. Stand if you want. Kneel if you want. Choice, finally. Session continued without collapse, without chaos, despite every prophecy of disorder. Law adapted in one day. Culture shifted slower, one hearing at a time. Theron's vulnerability, the part he had hidden beneath discipline, surfaced in narrow windows few people saw. He still slept lightly, still kept 2 blades within reach, still tracked exits in every room. Betrayal from a past intended, and a brother's death had taught him attachment could be weaponized against a ruler. He had built his reign around that lesson. Griffin did not ask him to unlearn caution. She asked him to stop treating care like a tactical leak. He tried, awkwardly at first, then with less apology. One night after a border briefing ran late, she found him in map rooms staring at casualty markers from an older campaign, thumb pressed to one pin so hard the skin blanched. "You are somewhere else," she said. He exhaled. 10 years ago, he answered. She stepped beside him, not touching yet. "You came back," she said. He looked at her, tired and unguarded. "Because you kept standing." Their bond did not erase conflict. They argued over budget lines, over deployment schedules, over how fast to prosecute corrupt guardians when courts were already overloaded. The difference was structure. She had standing, voice, and veto channels codified in co-ruler charter. When she disagreed, she did so in recorded sessions, not whispered corridors. He listened more than his reputation predicted and conceded more than counsel expected when her arguments held. Ilyan transitioned from reluctant handler to sworn lead for Griffin's security detail, a role he accepted with visible reluctance and invisible commitment. "I prefer facts to loyalty oaths," he told her during swearing. "Lucky for both of us," she said. "My life currently requires both." For the first time in months, he almost smiled. Summer brought final legal closure on the contract network. 17 forced labor assignments were voided and survivors compensated through seized estate funds. Guardian review boards opened in 4 provinces, using the Stormborn case as precedent. Sabine's petitions for sentence reduction failed twice when independent audits confirmed systemic abuse. She remained at Border Estate under monitoring, influential no longer. Rook disappeared from Capital Gossip by harvest. Reports placed him supervising bridge maintenance crews in a distant district, rankless, competent, unseen. Griffin heard the update and felt no triumph, only a quiet end to a question that had haunted her since 19. His rejection had never been proof she was unworthy. It had been proof he chose status over truth when forced to pick. On the first snow of late 2028, exactly 3 years after her public rejection, the palace held open tribunal review in the central yard, where the old Boeing Right had once sorted people into compliance and silence. This time, benches were mixed by role, not rank. ERA presented annual registry findings. Ilyan submitted security outcomes. Griffin read amendment outcomes and pending reforms in a clear voice that carried to the back wall. Theron stood at her side in formal black, no armor, crown on, hand occasionally brushing her sleeve when cold wind rose. Tiny gesture, public, deniable if anyone asked, unmistakable if anyone watched close. After session, the clerk announced one final matter, ceremonial only yet felt by everyone present. By council ratification and covenant seal, Griffin Stormborn is recognized as Omega Queen and co-ruler under Crown law. The crown set on her head was lighter than she expected and heavier in meaning than any metal could hold. She looked over faces in the crowd and saw Omegas who had once lowered their eyes now meeting hers openly. She saw older alphas adjusting to a world that had not ended when one law changed. She saw young couriers in patched coats standing a little straighter. Theron leaned close enough that only she heard. "Still refuse to bow?" She huffed a short laugh. "Frequently." "Good." She turned toward him. No witnesses needed for this part, though witnesses existed anyway. "I choose this," she said quietly, "not for legal record, for life." His answer came just as quiet. "So do I." That winter night, after halls emptied and celebration fires burned low, Griffin walked the upper terrace where she had once hidden from court whispers. The city spread below, roofs silvered with frost, tribunal tower lit in warm bands against dark sky. She was still the woman who delivered hard packets through bad weather, still the woman who told costly truth to power. The difference was no longer private resilience against public erasure. Her worth had been recognized by the highest authority in her world and written into law no one could dismiss as sentiment. Theron joined her with 2 mugs of spiced tea, handed one over without ceremony, shoulder brushing hers as if this had always been possible. For 3 years he had watched to see if her defiance would hold under pressure. For 3 years she had interpreted his silence through wounds that taught her authority only used and discarded. They had reached each other through legal war, bloodline fracture, attempted murder, and institutional change, each paying cost that proved the choice was real. She looked at him and finally let herself say what had taken years to trust. You saw me before I could survive being seen. He did not answer with speech right away. His hand found hers, fingers rough from weapons and paperwork both, and held. When he spoke, his voice carried that same simple certainty he used for law, now aimed at her. I saw you. I chose you. I will keep choosing you. No chamber vote remained. No guardian stood above her signature. No command seat could unmake what had been made in public and in private. In spring, they would travel the provinces together for registry rollout audits. Queen and king on muddy roads with too many files and not enough sleep. Arguing policy in carriages, stopping for tribunal inspections where young Omegas no longer received bowing commands as law. Ira would run data review from Capitol and send correction requests at dawn. Elian would mutter about security while secretly building contingency plans that kept everyone alive. Work would continue because justice was maintenance, not spectacle. Tonight was quieter. Griffin rested her head briefly against Theron's shoulder and watched snow begin again, light at first, then steady, covering old footprints in the courtyard below where once she had stood at 19, while someone chose not to choose her. The same world had forced her down and watched her refuse. The same hierarchy had witnessed her public rejection and later her public claim. The same law that marked her unranked had been rewritten in record because she stood. He paid cost, and both chose with full knowledge of consequence. By dawn, the city would wake to ordinary sounds, market carts, patrol calls, archive bells, and people would still argue over policy and precedent and whether the crown had moved too fast or too slow. Griffin could live inside those arguments now without losing herself. She had a seat, a bond, a title earned in the open, and a life that looked like work shared with a man who had finally lowered armor enough to be known. On the terrace, under first snow of their first winter fully claimed, the unranked Omega who never bowed stood beside her Alpha King, and neither of them looked away.